Hello, my lovely patrons, and welcome to June's 40-minute video podcast. For those of you who pledged $10 or more to me this month, I just wanted to thank you so much for all of your support, and I really hope you guys enjoy the rewards for this month. I also wanted to quickly thank everyone who took the time out of their lives to come to my meetup in Denver. I can't put into words just how amazing it was to meet all of you and to put a face to a lot of these names, and just kind of it reaffirmed my belief and joy and commitment to being an artist. So you guys seriously did make this month, this very hectic month, so much more bearable and so much more enjoyable with just your presence and your existence. And for those of you who couldn't make it in person, I know you were there with me in spirit, and I just really do appreciate all of the love and support. I'm currently all moved into a temporary place in Seattle. All of my stuff is in storage, and I have a pretty large bedroom to myself where I set up my studio and my workstation. So it's been really nice to kind of just have my own space and get back into the swing of things. Although, you know, this crazy schedule isn't over yet because we are still in the process of selling our condo in Oakland and in the process of looking for a new place in Seattle so that I can, you know, really set up shop and kind of nest, so to speak. So I'm really excited. There are a few housing prospects, but nothing finalized yet. But I am just really hopeful and keeping my fingers crossed that we find a house that we love and that we actually get the house and we don't end up having to pay too much for it. But anyways, okay, enough of the life updates. I wanted to dive into your questions this month before I run out of time to do so. So let's just get started right away. The first question is from Stephanie, who asks, where do you get your intricate frames? So I get my frames from an eclectic variety of sources. I love going to antique fairs, and that's kind of where I first discovered that beautiful aesthetic of the ornate, intricate frames. Back in Oakland, there was a really awesome antique fair called the Alameda Antique Fair, and I would try to go every month or every other month. Also, a lot of estate sales. So you could look for those on Craigslist or in your local newspaper. But estate sales are basically huge yard sales / garage sales where they are getting rid of an entire house's worth of items. And usually you can find some really beautiful frames there, especially if the estate sale is held by the household of someone of older age, because older people like to collect, or I guess in my experience, I've noticed they generally like to collect more antique, ornate objects. Also, you can visit frame stores, of course. There's Michael's, Aaron's Brothers, and whatever your local frame shop is. They usually carry a variety of styles, though most of the frame shops I've seen have really shifted their gears to cater towards the more modern aesthetic. But if you get your pieces custom framed, they usually always offer an ornate option for the frame. And also places like Hobby Lobby, Ross, Marshall's, TJ Maxx, those places you might have to do some digging because, you know, they're not as predictable in terms of their inventory. They usually carry items that were out of season, or I don't actually know exactly how it works, but basically it changes a lot and there's not like a set list of things you can buy. But I always like to go treasure hunting in those stores when I have time on the weekends, and I can usually pick up a few pretty good frames there pretty frequently. And then I actually have heard of artists going to Walmart or Target even to find beautiful ornate frames. So honestly, there's so many places to get frames. Online shopping is a great place as well. There's websites like, I think there's pictureframes.com, which is a website that sells a wide variety of picture frames at pretty good prices. They usually have a lot of sales. But yeah, so just don't give up. Check out furniture stores, antique shops. You know, there are many places to get ornate frames. The next question is from Katrina, who asks, hi, Happy, do you feel like you can succeed as a part-time artist? So I definitely do believe you can succeed as a part-time artist because I've seen it happen. A lot of the artists that I really look up to, who have exhibited in many affluent galleries and publications, they are part-time. They have a full-time day job and they do art on the weekends or at night. That being said, for me personally, I don't think I can balance it. I have a lot of respect for artists who do have a part-time job or a full-time job in addition to their art career. I think it's absolutely amazing the level of time management and organization and self-discipline that goes into managing 2 careers and also managing like a social life and getting enough sleep. But for me, I just know I'm the kind of person that needs to focus all of my time on the art career in order for myself to grow and improve and manage my business at a reasonable pace. I think, I definitely tried doing the part-time route at first, and I tried balancing my full-time tech job and just trying to start off my art career, on the weekends and in the evenings. And I just found myself to be way too exhausted and mentally and physically drained at the end of the workday to really give my art the attention and the care that it deserves. So for me, life is way more enjoyable when I can prioritize the things I love to do the most. So I think it's definitely possible to be successful as a part-time artist, but not for me. For me, I need it to occupy my full-time job. And oftentimes it spills into my free time as well. So I can't imagine squeezing in another career on top of that. But yeah, I think everyone's different and everyone's habits and preferences are different. So I'm not saying no one else can be successful as a part-time artist. Just for me, I prefer to be a full-time artist. Okay, next up we have a question from Emily, who asks, when you take photos of your work with your DSLR camera, do you tweak any of the manual settings or just the auto setting? Also, do you know what would be the best way to frame a canvas or wood panel painting? I've heard of floater frames, but I want to frame them more ornately. Thanks for being such a huge inspiration. P.S. Would you ever consider exhibiting your art down here in Australia? Well, thank you so much, Emily. I definitely would love to exhibit in Australia if I ever find a gallery that wants me to show with them and the scheduling is right. Definitely. I love sending my pieces all over the world. In a way, I get to kind of travel and live vicariously through them. So yeah, that's definitely a huge possibility in the future. In terms of framing a canvas or a wood panel painting, my recommendation honestly is to get an open back frame, preferably solid wood, and to go to a store like Michael's or any frame shop or Hobby Lobby or Aaron's Brothers and ask them to install it for you. And what they'll do is they'll secure it with these like little metal nails or pins, and they will add a dust cover and add a hanging wire. And it usually doesn't cost too much money. I think the most I've paid was maybe $20 to get a huge painting framed. So as long as you buy the frame ahead of time, you can save a lot of money. That being said, if you pay for a full like end-to-end custom framing that includes them actually providing the frame for you, and if you have like an irregular sized piece, they'll have to cut the frame for you, that can go up into the hundreds. It'll be way more expensive. So my recommendation is to get pre-made panels or canvases, or if you're making them yourself, make them in the more standard sizes, which 8 by 10, 11 by 14, 16 by 20, sizes like that. And then with those sizes, you can usually find a lot of pre-made frames that are ready to go, and you can just pay a little bit to have them professionally installed. I've never or rarely have installed the frame myself, so I can't really give too many tips on that. But hopefully my tip about getting it installed with a pre-made frame can help you out there. And in terms of taking photos of my work, I definitely use manual settings, not auto settings, because I want to make sure that the lighting is perfect, that it's not too dark or not too washed out. I actually would recommend, and this is what I do as well, I take around 3 different photos with 3 different configurations of the settings. So one that maybe feels a little bit darker, one that feels a little bit brighter, and one that's somewhere in between. And then usually out of the three, I can find one that is most easy to work with when it comes time to tweaking the picture in Photoshop. So yeah, I usually put it on manual setting with autofocus though. I have the camera autofocus, and then I tweak the ISO, the exposure, and the white balance. So yeah, it's just, there's a lot of things that, oh yeah, also the focal length is really important too. So yeah, I would say definitely try to read up on the like how to work a DSLR, and try to read up on how to use the manual camera settings, because it gives you so much more control and usually yields way better results than just sticking to auto. Okay, next question is from Sugar, cute name, who says, "Hi Happy, I'm new to oil painting and I would like to know what the underlayer is for, and does it matter what color you use for it? And also, what is a second color blocking layer for?" I don't know if you've mentioned it before, but I thought I would just ask to be sure. Yeah, no worries at all. These are really important questions, and I'm happy to explain them as many times as needed. So the underlayer, or the underpainting, in my opinion, it's a rough blueprint of your piece, meaning laying out the composition, where everything goes, and it's just kind of like a quick sketch to help serve as a guideline for the next layers. In terms of what color you use, theoretically, it doesn't matter because you could definitely paint over it, but I would always recommend to use a color that won't conflict with your piece. So for example, if you want your piece to have very cool colors, don't use like bright orange for your underlayer. Or if you have a piece that has warm colors, don't use blue for your underlayer. But honestly, I've seen it work both ways. I know like a really common painting technique is to first wash the entire canvas with like a solid warm color, and that way no matter what your painting ends up looking like in terms of the hues, it'll kind of have you be forced to give the painting like an opaque, rich coverage. So I wouldn't stress out too much about it. What I do to be safe is just use a light gray underpainting for my sketch. It also varies because some people like to have very detailed underpaintings that serve as like pretty much like the entire finished piece, and then they use mediums to glaze colors over the underpainting. And then other people, kind of like me, I use just a very quick rough sketch, and I pretty much paint over the whole thing, and none of the underlayer or underpainting ever gets shown in the final piece. So it's really up to you. Yeah, I would say stick to colors that complement your piece, but don't worry too much about it because there are many different techniques. And the second color blocking layer for me is quite important because that's where I first start refining the details. Those are colors that usually end up being very similar to what's seen in the final piece. Again, because of the nature of oil painting and the fact that paintings take so many layers, mine take sometimes around 3 to 4, sometimes 5. The first layer isn't super crucial in the sense that if you mess up, there are plenty of opportunities to fix it. And if you don't mess up, you might end up messing up in a future layer. So the first color blocking layer isn't crucial, but to me it's very important because it gives me a sense of what, like almost a starting point of what the final piece will look like. And for me, the color blocking layer also serves the purpose of determining what the color scheme should be. This is the layer where I kind of lay down the basic blotches and shapes of every element in the piece. Like the one I'm working on now, I didn't take time to carefully mix the perfect shades of green or blue or brown. I rather lay them down, and then I could kind of ask myself, well, does this part need a little bit more blue, or should I add a little bit more pink to this? And it's kind of acting as a starting point so I can keep in mind what I need to change or what I need to keep as I continue working on the piece. Also, one thing about color blocking, I know it's different for a lot of people, but for me, for my color blocking method, I like to use colors that I'm going to end up using in future layers. So for skin tones, for example, the first layer of skin tones and the second and third layer of skin tones don't use different colors. I pretty much go in with the same set of colors, sometimes maybe adding a little bit of something different. Like if I'm working on some some shadow part that's super dark. Maybe I'll introduce like a blue or something, but usually I keep it almost identical to the first layer. And for me, that kind of builds on the opacity or the opaqueness and the richness of the colors. Of course, unless I make a mistake, in which case I'll change up the colors to fix it. But I usually like to keep my color blocking layer and my subsequent layers very consistent. But yeah, like I said before, and I always like to add this addendum to all of my answers and tips. Every artist has a different way of working, has a different method that's catered to their unique preferences and habits. So don't ever think that, my answer is the right one. It's just simply my personal response and my personal preferences. Okay, this next question is really interesting. It's from Linda Sue, and she says, could you talk a bit about the stories behind your paintings? I'd really like to know what kind of stories you form that we, most of the time, don't know about. Have a lovely day. Well, thank you, Linda. I hope you have an awesome day as well. Yeah, I'd love to share some of the stories behind my pieces. I think overall, they're very open. I don't like to assign something too specific because I think a lot of joy of painting and being an artist and seeing the response to my paintings is listening to the stories and interpretations that the viewers can make for themselves. But there's always kind of one general aesthetic, I guess emotional aesthetic that I aim for in most of my pieces, and that is to transplant the viewer into a world, like a different world than Earth, and somewhere that is completely magical, almost like a dream world, somewhere that is free from all the stress and like errands of everyday life, somewhere that's a complete fantasy, that's not just purely joy. I don't think I ever want my paintings to be like happy-go-lucky all the time. I want them to be mysterious, be eerie sometimes, surreal, and I want there to be a lot of ways for the viewer of the piece to kind of explore their own imagination. So, for my mermaid pieces, I really wanted to make sure the viewer almost could feel immersed in the mermaid's world, like almost losing track that they're looking at a painting, rather feel like they're a part of the experience, part of the scene. And I wanted to always make sure that my audience, feels something, like whether it's joy or sorrow or, nostalgia. I always want to make sure that my paintings have some sort of emotional element to them. It's never just purely to be pretty or provocative. I want to make sure that there is this feeling that there could be a story interpreted from the piece. And like I said before, I like to give people the space to make their own stories. I don't really assign like an identity to my characters. They're kind of like a mirror for the viewer. But yeah, generally I just want that kind of alternate universe, magical dreamland feel, and I want to make sure that my pieces are never dull, I guess. It's hard to say that because what does dull even mean? Like, art is so subjective, but the story I always try to tell is something that, like, I guess I'll put it this way. The story I'd want to tell in my pieces is a viewer can see it and be enchanted by it and want to stay a little while longer, like want to stay and linger and look at the piece more, explore the little details more, and maybe ponder over their own interpretation, their own story a bit more. I just want people to be able to kind of have that sense of wonder and curiosity when seeing my work. Okay, next up, we have a question from Mandy, who says, "Hi, Happy. I've seen that some artists have certificates for their original paintings. Is that something everyone should do when selling their originals? Is it something the gallery gives when it's sold through a gallery?" So yeah, I know what you're talking about, and honestly, I've seen it both ways. I've worked with galleries that do require a certificate of authenticity, and they require the artist to sign off on it. And then I've also worked with, actually the majority of galleries I work with don't require a certificate of authenticity. And I think for me personally, I don't always do it. I do it if someone requests it and wants it, of course I will definitely be more than happy to. But yeah, just based on the artists that I've followed, the galleries I've worked with, it doesn't seem to be a super common trend. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But yeah, I guess it really depends on your personal preference. I don't think it hurts to have it though. So, if it's something you're thinking about doing or providing to a gallery just in case, I say go for it. But just my personal preference is that I think it's pretty clear if my painting is original. It's going to be really hard to replicate it or, to make a print of it and try to pass it off as the original. Like the original pieces are, if you see them in person, they're very obviously like one of a kind. So the certificate really isn't needed. And same with my prints. Like I don't share my high res images at all with anyone. So I pretty much only share online and through emails or in my shop. I only share like the low res images. So if anyone were to try to fabricate my prints, it'd be very obvious because the prints would be super low quality. But yeah, like I said before, if people want a certificate of authenticity, I'm more than happy to provide it. But I think I've done enough fail-safe measures to make sure that there cannot be any fake or contraband versions of my work out there. And I have definitely encountered that. It's not very fun. Like I've seen websites that have sold like prints of my artwork illegally, and I've seen people who have either replicated my work and try to sell originals and pass it off as their own, or people who have tried to print my artwork on their own merchandise. And yeah, it's really, really upsetting. It makes me, obviously, as an artist, feel very violated and disrespected. But, I can guarantee you those products are not going to look anything like the real deal because, like I said, they don't have access to the high-res images, so the prints will be low quality. If they try to reproduce one of my paintings, obviously it's not painted by me, it's not signed by me, and it's going to be in a completely different style and skill level. So yeah, for me, it's like, it's upsetting when people do it, but I don't think having a certificate of authenticity would prevent people from doing it, and nor would it give any more credit or validation to the actually original authentic pieces. So that's kind of my stance. Okay, this next question is from Art by Kat, who says, "Hi Happy, I hope you're loving your new home, and I can't even imagine all the pressure you've been under doing a solo show and moving at the same time." Well, thank you. I'm really appreciative that you are I guess thinking about me and notice all the work that's been going on. Anyways, continuing, Kat says, "My question is, I was watching one of your older Patreon videos and I noticed that you work the same way I do. Get your colors in where they belong and try to get straight to painting and worry about values in the following layers. I tried doing a value underpainting and totally hated that method, but am left wondering why the majority of artists are taught that way. Is it a personal preference, or is there a lesson that I'm missing in that technique? I found it to be a waste of paint and time and would love to know your perspective. Also, I painted on wood panel for the first time after you recommended it and love how smooth it is. My problem is that I feel like it's super absorbent and the colors look very dull after drying. I oiled the painting out, but it didn't really help after it dried. Any advice? I would also like to add that I did 3 layers of acrylic gesso and 2 layers of oil ground to prime the panel. Thank you so much, and I'm so sorry about the essay." No worries at all. I love long questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. So the first question about a high value underpainting versus kind of a more rough underpainting, I am on the same page as you. I started off making my underpaintings very high value, very detailed, and ended up just having to repaint over it anyway. So I didn't really find that it helped. Rather, it kind of was wasted time, which is why now for my underpaintings, I don't worry so much about value. I just worry about color blocking and kind of knock the value and colors, knock them out in the same process in the subsequent layers. I don't have like a dedicated layer for values and a dedicated layer for colors. I think that method is definitely the one that's classically taught in art school and in ateliers, and it's the method that a lot of the old masters used to work. I'm not sure why it's more popular or why it's not as accepted or preferred with certain artists like me. I just chalk it up to everyone's different. Everyone has their different preferences and different habits. Some people might feel more secure and safe starting off, not worrying about colors and just using like a monochromatic palette to establish the value first. And then, when the value is established, they maybe feel like they're better equipped to then play with the relationship of these values versus the colors they want to put in. And then, for me, it's almost kind of flipped. I like to know the colors I want to use first, and then I introduce the element of like tweaking the values to suit these colors and, knowing like, okay, should I maybe like make this part darker because it's more saturated, or make this part brighter because it's less saturated. It's kind of almost a reverse way of thinking when compared to the high value underpainting method. Again, I think it's just different preferences. But yeah, I really don't think you should question your technique, especially if it works for you and you're happy with the results. I feel like having a different way of painting, or maybe just kind of being more faithful to your personal way of painting, gives your art that unique touch, that unique signature style, so that people know it's yours. To me, like, the signature style comes in not just the finished product, but it's displayed in the process of creating the piece as well. So there's no shame or harm, in my opinion, in sticking to what works for you and what you like to do the best. And in terms of the wood panels being absorbent, I think you definitely primed it very well. In fact, I think you went above and beyond. 3 layers of gesso and 2 layers of oil ground is more than enough. Most panels I work with only have around 2 layers of whatever you prime with. So I feel like I know what you're talking about with it being absorbent. I'm not sure if I have any techniques to help reduce the dullness while you're working on the piece, other than just, there are a lot of mediums you can use that improve the gloss. And usually when it's glossier, the colors look richer. But I do know that after you finish your painting, I would highly recommend that you varnish your piece with a high gloss varnish. Of course, I always use the Gamvar, which is from Gamblin. It's a high gloss varnish, and I usually apply 2 or 3 very thin coats, and that helps unify the sheen and also enrich the colors. So it makes the darks really dark and luminous, makes the brights pop, makes the whole piece feel more saturated and luminous. But yeah, I do know that sometimes, when you lay your paint on and it's wet, it looks way more saturated and luminous than when it dries. That's something that, can't be avoided, and it's something that can easily be fixed when you varnish your piece at the end. If you really want to see your colors pop and be rich throughout the entire process, I know there's also varnishes that are tailored to like being worked on. So usually the Gamvar and most varnishes that you use for the finishing touch, you're not advised to continue painting on top of that varnish. It's when your piece is absolutely done, it's been dried for a week or so, dried to the touch, and that's when you varnish. But I have definitely seen varnishes that are meant to be worked into the painting and will allow you to continue to build layers, and basically the varnish is used almost like a medium. So maybe that could help as well. But yeah, hopefully these tips work. Sorry that I don't have more advice about how to reduce the dullness with just normal mediums and normal paints. Oh, also, just to add on to that question, I wanted to remind you that the absorbency of the wood panel is something you'll definitely get used to. I know you said that you painted on it for the first time recently, so just don't fret too much over it. I would say just keep going at it. If it's a surface you like, just keep making more and more pieces, and over time you won't really notice the absorbency rate, because that's something that you were trained from using canvas to expect a certain low absorbency rate. And then when you move on to a new surface like wood panel with a high absorbency rate, it just takes some getting used to. It's the same situation when I ever have to paint on canvas. or vellum or any surface that has a really high absorbency rate, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm expecting my colors to be dry already. Why am I still, pushing paint around? So yeah, just anytime you switch to something new, it takes a little bit of ramp up time to get used to it. But over time, I think you'll really like it, and it'll just be a very seamless, enjoyable experience. Okay, the last question is from Sammy, who says, "Hi, Happy. I hope your move is going well as the solo show." Well, thank you, Sammy. I'm currently doing commissions for some friends that want me to do stuff, but how do you go about pricing your work? I'm very bad at pricing things, but I don't want to make someone pay for something unfair, but I also don't want to devalue the art. I don't know if someone already asked this, but I would greatly appreciate the advice. Yeah, so pricing is a question I get asked a lot. I definitely don't mind talking about it some more because it's really important for artists, especially if this is how we make our living. We got to figure out how to price our work. Like you said, you have to strike a balance between not overcharging your customer, but also not undervaluing yourself and your work and your time. So right off the bat, I think you should incorporate the price of the cost of the materials into the price. So if you spent like $10 on your canvas and another, like, let's say you spent a total of like $100 on your paint and paintbrushes, obviously you don't have to charge your client $100 because it's not like you can't use your supplies after this one commission is over, but incorporate a fraction of that, because oil paint really does get used up quickly, especially colors like white. For me, I go through tubes of it. I need a new tube every month. So, incorporate a fraction of your kind of more, I guess, commonly used art supplies, and then incorporate 100% of the cost of the materials that's going to be used one time just for the piece. So your wood panel, your frame, if you have that, shipping, things like that. And now, after you've calculated the cost of your supplies, it's time to calculate the cost of your time. So I would say if you're just starting out and you're still relatively new, or if you're just doing art as a hobby and it's not your full-time job, it's okay to price it a little lower. I like to maybe find like the minimum wage for where I live, or a wage that I think I would be comfortable with. Obviously, I don't think minimum wage should be your ultimate goal. It's okay to ask for a little bit higher, especially if you're good and you've put a lot of time into practicing and honing your skills. But I also think like it really depends on what artists in your similar like playing field are pricing their works at. So if you're just starting out and you're new, you probably shouldn't be pricing your work the same way as someone who's like a professional, who's done it for years and decades and has a lot more experience than you. So you want to find someone who's like also new, just starting out, and see what they're pricing at, and make a price that's fair given your market and given your competitors, I guess. And then at the same time though, like I would also say, don't worry too much about all these other factors. Ultimately, like what's most important is the price that you're comfortable asking. So if you've done your research, calculated the cost of materials, calculated the prices that your competitors are asking, and you still feel like, what, I've put a lot of time into this, I have a lot of pride in my work, I think I'm doing good work, and I really feel like this price is still too low, by all means, I think you should price it higher. Ultimately, it's a price that you're comfortable parting with. So, kind of listen to your gut here. Sometimes I feel like in the past I've undercharged simply because I felt like other people were charging less, so I should charge less as well. And, it did make me very uncomfortable. Like, of course, I'm happy to give my artwork to a home that loves them and, is going to cherish them. But, I have had that kind of gut feeling of just being a little bit regretful and a little bit like, wow, okay, I spent, 10 hours on this piece and I only got paid like below minimum wage. So yeah, if you're not comfortable with something, then don't do it. Also, yeah, if you're feeling like maybe you're overcharging, then that, also listen to your gut there. Do the research, think about it, and think about maybe if you overcharge, you might lose their business, or if you overcharge, you might not get as much business. So as it's better to like make 3 paintings and be able to sell all of them than overcharge for 1 painting but not be able to sell any more, in my opinion. So yeah, it's just all a matter of finding that balance. Sorry, I know I'm being vague. I can't just throw a number out there. I can't be like, okay, for this size, charge this much, because it really varies depending on how complicated the commission is. Like a commission that is a family portrait of 5 people is obviously going to take more time and be more difficult to paint than a commission for only 1 person. So yeah, just kind of, and I would also say be open to talking about it with your client. Like I'm sure if they're friends, they would definitely be open to like listening to you, hearing you out, and I'm sure they'll want to support you and give you a fair price. I personally offer my friends a small discount, but it's not so significant that I feel like it would be wasting my time or doing a bunch of work for free. I offer them a small discount because I love my friends and I love my family. So friends and family get a discount, but it's not so significant that, I'm cheating my normal customers out of, getting a fair price. It's a small discount. And most of the times I feel like I've been really lucky. A lot of my friends insist on paying full price because they want to support my work. And for that, I'm really, really grateful. And, they'll be like, you know what, no need for a discount. Like, I want to support you. I want you to charge me what's fair. And, that always warms my heart. So yeah, for friends and family, offer a discount if you want, but it's not something that I think is required of you, or it's not something that you should abuse to the point where it's going to hurt your livelihood. And then one last thing sorry, I know I'm answering this question for a really long time, but one last thing about pricing is don't be afraid to ask your clients what their budget is. So this is a method I found works as well for me too. Right off the bat, I asked them like, hey, what is your budget? What's the maximum that you're comfortable or able to pay? And if they tell me a number, then I can say, okay, well, for that price, here are the options that I offer. So if someone says like, I can pay a maximum of $1,000, then I can say, well, awesome. Like I can probably make a relatively large painting for that price. I can have it framed for you. It can be relatively detailed and complicated. And then if someone says, you know what, I can only pay like $300, I might say like, okay, well, I could do a really small, simple piece, or, I can maybe do a drawing instead. So just be honest and open and forthcoming with your client right off the bat. Don't be afraid to ask them questions. Don't be afraid to explain yourself. I think everyone doing business or just living their lives in the real world appreciates honest and open and sincere interactions. So don't ever feel like too shy or embarrassed to, ask them how much money they're willing to pay or how much money they have set aside for this commission. Yeah, I would say like as long as you handle yourself professionally and with honesty and grace, it'll work out well. And best of luck with your commission. Okay, awesome. I think I have answered all of the questions you guys posted for me this month. Yay! I love it when I'm able to do that. But yeah, I wanted to conclude this podcast by thanking you all again, not only for supporting me financially, but also emotionally. With working on a solo show and moving, solo shows are tough because you can't sell any of your pieces as you make them. You have to kind of wait until the very end. And, with moving, there's so many costs with like packing, driving, moving, selling, all these things. So it's been really, really amazing to have support on Patreon to help me get through these months. And I just really couldn't have done it without you guys. You guys are seriously feel like family to me, and just friends, close friends who share my love for art and also are just awesome, kind-hearted people who are there for me and there for each other. And yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, be a little sappy at the end of this podcast and just tell you guys how much I love you and how much you mean to me. And, even if you pledge like $1, I'm seriously still so grateful. So yeah, I hope you guys have an awesome day or week or month, wherever you are. I hope you enjoyed this month's rewards and this painting. This piece took me like I don't know, 30 hours to complete. So it's really fun to see it in such a fast time lapse. But yeah, anyways, I wish you all a lovely day. I hope to catch you guys next month. Thank you so much for being my patrons. I love you guys, and bye.